Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and thank you so much for tuning into one of our talks today. We are a year-round talk series bringing you the best creative voices across film, television, and theater. And today, we're so fortunate to be joined by the wonderful behind-the-scenes crew who put together every single visual aspect that you see on screen in the show Snowpiercer. We're joined by Geoff Scott, who is the VFX supervisor, Jay Prychidny, who is the editor on the series, Steve Geaghan, who is the production designer, and Cranstoun, who is the costume designer. And Caroline, I wanted to start by asking you about the costume design on this series, because one of the things that's really fascinating is the fact that a lot of the characters actually don't change costumes, particularly when you look at the characters who are in the tail, there's a difference to how often they have costume changes versus the passengers up in first class. But there's still challenges that come with keeping people in the same outfits throughout a series. And so what are the unique challenges that come with that aspect of building out the costume design for the series?
Well, when people don't change clothing on a daily basis, you lose a sense of time. That's one thing, because we tend to associate a costume change with a new day. So there's that you always need to kind of keep in mind. And quite often, even with a costume that doesn't change much, you have to be able to show passage of time by having the costume change slightly. But yeah, and the same goes for people in uniforms, and there's a lot of uniforms on the train also. Yeah, it definitely helps illustrate the difference between the privilege of being able to change your clothing on a daily basis and how first class is so different from third or the tail, of course.
And then, Steve, I wanted to talk to you about the design of the train carriages, because obviously, as we know within the series, technically there's 1,001 train carriages, and there's a lot of extensive design that goes into every single one of them. But it's also interesting to look at the train carriages and locations in terms of the physical movement that the actors are doing in them, and how the space is really utilized, given that it is also a very physically compact space for them to move within. So do you find yourself thinking of and asking questions from Graham, the showrunner, and the rest of the creative team about what the usage of the space is going to be, especially when it comes to designing new train carriages as the story continues to evolve?
My job starts off with the script. Whatever is script indicated is where I begin. I then talk to Graham and Christoph Shareva, our director-producer, or who's ever directing it, and we determine what the metaphor is for that car. When it comes down to, which also dictates the usage. We're dealing with spaces that are generally 12 to 14 feet wide, 10 to 12 feet high, and 40 to 50 feet long in general. And the metaphors that we come up with are applied to the car, and they are binding and they are linear. In other words, let's say for Wilfred's car, in the initial conversation that I had with Graham and Aubrey Nealon, after about 20 minutes in, I said, so this guy is like a cross between Henry Ford, Hannibal Lecter, and P.T. Barnum. And their response was, yes. And that gave me, once you have the character, you can determine the environment. So you take all three of those character positionings together, and each one forms a visual metaphor. The organization and brilliance, the showmanship, and the absolute inhumanity. And this is all shown in his environment. And so this is just one example where every car that we design starts off with the metaphor of who inhabits it. So that you look at that car immediately and know, oh God, this is not a good place. And that's my job as a designer.
That's so wonderful. And then Jay, in terms of editing the series, every single show and every single film kind of finds its own rhythm and pacing and energy within post-production, from the choices that you make in terms of what take you're utilizing to like the cuts that you choose to make. So what was that journey like, particularly with Snowpiercer, in figuring out what that specific pacing and energy and rhythm was going to be in your journey as an editor?
It was really fun, actually, because I edited the first episode of the series, and there weren't really which often happens, I'd say 80% of the time when you work on a show, you don't really get to talk to a lot of people ahead of time about kind of what they're looking for in editing. Oftentimes, everyone's so focused on the other aspects of production. So a lot of the time you just get the footage coming in and you just start to vibe with it and try to figure out what is this new show. And so something that I really started to develop just kind of naturally, really, with the first episode was just giving it this really kind of jump cutty kind of feeling. And I guess it also depends on what area, in season 1 at least, it kind of depends what area of the train you're in. Because first class cars, it would be kind of much more kind of traditional cutting, kind of, just more straightforward. Whereas in a lot of the other parts of the train, if you really look at it, I mean, it's not supposed to feel jump cut. Like you're not supposed to just feel like you're watching jump cuts all over the place. But if you really look at the cutting, in a lot of sequences, every single cut is a jump cut. And, especially in the tail or, in different parts. So that was just part of the language that developed, and having this kind of different editing language for different parts of the train. It's just kind of something that developed naturally just out of my own instincts, and also working with James Hawes, who directed the first episode of the series. And I don't know, it just kind of stuck. And, like a lot of creative decisions that happen in editing, things sometimes just kind of stick and they get carried through.
So great. And then Geoff, I was interested in terms of the visual effects on the series, because, there's moments like when we look at the train going by and we see the world outside of the train, that's so visual effects heavy. But then there's also so many slight details that you're putting in really nuanced ways that are almost invisible to viewers and to audience members. And so I was really, really fascinated and interested in, with Snowpiercer, what are those smaller details that you and your team are working on in terms of visual effects that we might not necessarily realize are put together in that way when we're watching the show?
We work on a lot. We have a lot of crossover with a lot of departments. We help with makeup, and we help with. But the one thing is, very few of our cars are actually connected. And in particular, when we're doing sort of where we're carrying people through multiple cars, they're quite often walking in from and onto blue screens, and we do a lot of set extensions, which hopefully nobody's really noticed. Nobody's complained about it so far. So
I think they're seamless. I think they're some of the best effects on the show. You can't even tell they're set extensions, I think.
I'm blushing. But yeah, no, it's we do a lot of stuff. I mean, it was funny, Jay talking about the very first episode. The first 2 days we had this immaculate plan, which we were going to, every time in between each car is a junction car, right? So it's basically an airlock, and it makes sense. They want to make sure that they could seal off any section of the car in case there's a breach, and letting it in. And I think we shot maybe the first day, maybe even to the second day, and that's how we were going to save on visual effects, and we weren't going to need to connect it. Everyone's going to walk in, stop, door closes behind them, door opens in front of them, and they're magically transported. And I think after the first day and a half, they're like, this is going to be terrible. We need to put blue screens up. And I went, okay, I guess we're putting blue screens up. So that's
what you want to do to me all the time.
I know. Well, no, that's when you come to me asking, going, Geoff, I can't afford to build this. Can you help me out? Yeah. And I go, fine, Steve.
And I also wanted to ask all of you kind of collectively as a group, because, your departments really kind of cross over with each other a lot. When you first started working with Graham on the series, and he was starting to have conversations with all of you, both individually, but also together, what were the most useful pieces of information or the tools that were really helpful for him to give you in terms of the way that he'd visually constructed this world in his head, where he saw the series going, so that he could kind of work with each of you collaboratively to make sure that it really kind of like fitted his aesthetic vision, but also was really kind of like leaning into each of your individual skill sets to bring your perspective and your vision into the series as well. So what were the most useful pieces of information or specific tools that he gave you all?
If you want to start with me, I'll tell you right off the top. Yeah. It's Graham's ability to enunciate exactly what he wants. And that made my job very, very easy to come up with the metaphors on which to hang the visuals for my end of the job. But that's basically it. It's all Graham's approachability, his decisiveness, and his vision.
Is that the same for the rest of you?
I'll jump in. Basically, his mandate to me, and I mean, I've had the great pleasure of working with Graham on another show, with Jay. But his mandate to me was, is it real? Anytime I pitch something like, hey, what about this? He's like, is it real? Because it has to be real. And I'm like, so that's actually been really good at helping us keep us on track. That's why we based the exterior design of Snowpiercer on a very real train. It's or inspired by, not based on a train called the Mercury, and everything is real. Everything, there's no hover train, there's no floating, no magical mystery thing. It's all grounded in reality and how things work and what would happen. For example, a little thing is we have no trees because technically they should all be more or less frozen and shattered. We kept some of them in the Amazon because I'd happened to find a scientific article about how sapping trees will actually turn to glass in order for the tree to try and survive extreme colds. So then we can suddenly justify why the Amazon wasn't just a pile of sticks. And so there's a lot more scientific research than you would on, say, a show where it's just like, I don't know. And then it happened, it's fine. So.
Yeah, I never would have realized that in watching it. And Caroline, one of the things that I was interested about in terms of the costume design is your relationship with the cast on the series, because, you and Graham obviously build out a specific vision. You're working with each of the individual directors in terms of who these characters are and what you want the costumes to tell the audience, not just about who they are as a character, but the emotional journeys and arcs that they're going on throughout the series. But then you also have the cast coming in and they have perspectives and thoughts and ideas, particularly coming into the second season as they've been inhabiting these characters and they know the way that they respond to different things.
Yes.
So what does that relationship look like in terms of collaborating with the cast on the series? And did it evolve at all coming back into the second series?
Did it evolve? Yes. And thinking about it's funny, the Jennifer and Lena and a lot of the female cast, I do communicate very, very closely with in the very early stages of their costume conception, and quite often, like Miss Audrey has a lot of requirements and has some elaborate costumes. So Lena often has a lot of ideas, and I definitely work closely with her on that kind of thing, because movement for any of the cast can be, when they may know a little more than I do about what their movement is going to be and how physical they're going to be in their costumes. So we always discuss that very, very thoroughly. But I love collaborating with the actors. Then sometimes it doesn't happen until the fitting, and that's when you start really dialing it in and going, okay, this and could we add, and could I have this, and that sort of thing, which is fun. But sometimes it happens before you even start making the costume. So
yeah. And then Steve, you touched upon this a little bit in terms of like Mr. Wilford's personality and how that informs some of the production design. And in the second season, we're now seeing the introduction of another train that he's also kind of heading up. And what's interesting about looking at that train in relation to the Snowpiercer train is that it visually is a different space, but there are kind of design elements that come from Snowpiercer, because obviously he was part of the design and construction of that train as well. So how did you look at the construct of the Snowpiercer train and what had already been created and crafted, and put that into the details that you wanted to pull together for this secondary train that we're now being introduced to?
That's a good question, because the answer to that is quite straightforward. The whole Big Alice train is a prototype. So Wilford would have created this before he actually got involved in Snowpiercer. So that the technology in Big Alice is similar to that of Snowpiercer, but a predecessor. The cars are bigger. There's some double deckers. that we reveal. There's a full lab of 2 stories, and it is a much coarser series of environments than Snowpiercer. That's basically where we began with the design of the new cars for season 2. It's bigger, coarser, a predecessor. That's basically it.
Yeah, I love it. It's been so fun to watch this entirely new visual world come into the show. And then Geoff and
Well,
Jay,
I love the
wanted to ask-
double-decker aspect of it too.
Yeah.
Like that's the different aspect on Big Alice, which just gives it a totally different look, which is so cool.
You're
Yeah,
so
so-
right. And Jay, I wanted to ask you and Geoff about your collaborative relationship with each other, because, you know, you're both intertwined fully in the post-production process. And I was interested kind of like at what stages you both come into each other's world and the types of conversations and communication that are helpful for the two of you to have with each other about how the editing is going to fit with the visual effects. And even just to the point of like, at what stage do you kind of dive into editing versus when you're starting to add the visual effects into it?
Well, we hate each other, first of all. So
Yes,
that's one
well,
challenge.
I just threaten him with physical violence. Laugh, it's true. No. To be honest, I mean, with Jay cutting pretty much as we're shooting, initially I'll do some storyboards and give them to him, and I mean we work really closely right from the beginning, really, all the way through the end. I mean, you know, we're just on a hour-long conference call with all the way into color, you know, at the end of it. But and then we'll, you know, on our end, we'll design a shot where he's given us an area to put in, and then sometimes he'll be like, oh, you know, we should put another shot in here, and then we try and figure out if we can afford to do another shot, or, you know. So there's quite a bit of back and forth in that, you know. And sometimes I design a shot that is absolutely wrong, and he calls me out on it immediately, forthwith, if not sooner. Look at that smile. He takes great pleasure in it, to be honest. Yeah, that's right.
I mean, Geoff and I have worked together, like we worked on Orphan Black together. So we've been working together now for 6 years or something. So, and you love it. You love every second of
it's best. Yeah.
And, you know, so there is just a real comfortable shorthand there for sure, you know, because a lot of times you don't necessarily even really understand what the intention was from the footage or the sequence or whatever. You know, we don't have previs on this show. It's very rare that we work with previs on this show. So usually in the edit stage, it's really just imagining what things might be and just kind of using your imagination and what you think the visual effects will look like. So it's nice to be able to talk to Geoff about it in terms of just, well, what is the idea here and what is the plan? And Geoff's also just like my go-to person for just how does this train work? He seems to just know everything about how the train works. So if I have questions about what are the mechanics in this part of the train, somehow he'll know that. And I just trust he's right. I don't know.
No, honestly, I've literally thought I know how every piece of mechanics works in it. The electrical system between, you know, yeah, no, I need to get off the trains. Really,
because sometimes I get a lot of weird questions, like people trying to get me to justify certain things, and they want like the real like scientific explanation about why it's this way because of the train. And I'll be like, I don't know. So I'll just call up Geoff and just tell me some scientific thing about why the train is this way, so I can just tell them that.
Sounds like Geoff is Jennifer Connelly's character personified.
Oh, interesting.
A little bit hairy, you know.
Different outfit, more beard. And then do the two of you ever find it useful to step onto set? Like, do you ever go down to set when they're filming just to kind of start to have a sense of what things are visually looking like before you even start working with the footage together?
Oh, I'm on set most of the time. I have another on-set supervisor with me, but I'm there as well. I'm in the pre-production, you know, on set, and then you know, in the post-production.
Yeah, I'd go to set just for fun. I really have no real professional reason to be there. But it would be nice just to go and meet a lot of the crew and the cast and that kind of thing. Yeah, no, just for fun.
Yeah, no, honestly, they just take pictures in front of the sets going like this.
Yeah. I have pictures of myself in the engineer's chair in the Snowpiercer engine. I feel very special about that.
I haven't done that yet.
Or you have season 3, you'll have to make it down there.
Yeah.
And Steve and Caroline, similarly, I wanted to ask about the way that the two of you collaborate on the series as well, because, you know, in terms of the physical visual elements, you know, it really comes down to the two of you and your teams that you're working with to such a huge degree. And there's such a necessity for what both of you do to feel really cohesive. You know, if you think about the visual details of one of the trains needing to really live hand in hand with the costume design that's coming in together, the color palette feeling really, you know, specific in every single detail as well. So what does that look like in terms of the relationship that the two of you have together in collaborating and figuring out your individual details, but also coming together and making sure that it's so cohesive in the way that it is?
Well, for my part, we talk all the time, as often as we can, to make sure that we don't put blue costumes on actors in front of blue material. I know what she's doing. She looks at everything I'm doing. I show her all the illustrations that we do. We will alter each other's, when she says, oh, well, I'm thinking of using this and I really want to use this. And it's like, yeah, okay, fine, I'll change the color. So you know, from my point of view, we operate very closely. Caroline, what's your?
I totally agree. I mean, the first thing I do whenever there's a new environment is I head over to see what Steve's thinking and look at any illustrations he's got and try to, so I already have that in mind when I start to, sometimes you read, as soon as you start reading the script, Steve's already like got that part in the works. So yeah.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to work with you. Absolutely.
Work with you too.
Welcome back.
Looking forward to it.
And one of the things I wanted to ask all of you about is the journey in terms of filming the second season, because you'd filmed about, you know, it sounds like about 80% of the second series before COVID hit and before production just completely shut down very abruptly.
We filmed all of season 2 except for the last, I think, 7 days of filming.
Oh, wow.
I think it was 8.
That's amazing to have that
8
much.
days.
Yeah. But I was interested for all of you in how that kind of really impacted the work that you were doing with having that period of being shut down for a few months and then coming back onto set to continue. You know, obviously things like post-production and editing and visual effects, there's certain ways to kind of figure out doing some of that remotely, continuously. You know, I'm not sure what that looked like in terms of costume and production design in that interim period. So I was really interested for all of you what that interim period during the shutdown looked like in terms of if you were still connected to Snowpiercer and what things were still able to move forward, but also how it kind of forced you all to think about your roles and your work in completely different ways, particularly when you came back to filming those last few days.
Okay, well, I'll speak. So for me, I mean, to be honest, aside from you know the last 2 weeks, it really just kind of accelerated everything. You know, the plan was to always come back. You know, I was going to get a really cool office downtown.
Well, it was in debate for a long time, which really worried me about if we were going to come back. I mean, that was a long discussion too, that we didn't know that we were going to finish the season. And so there were some discussions about, would it be an 8-episode season? You know, all those, it was discussed from every angle because no one knew what was going on with COVID, but I was so grateful that we ended up finishing the season. But anyway, sorry, go ahead, Geoff.
No, I was just talking about when it hit versus, you know, but yeah, by the end of it, we were getting to the point where like Jay said, we didn't know what it was going to entail. If, you know, we were going to try and flesh more stuff out with visual effects. We didn't have, you know, the last 2 edit cuts where 2 episodes were sort of floating a little unfinished. And so, you know, we were starting getting to a point where we need to know the scale and scope of this if we're going to have a fighting chance to complete, you know, in time. But yeah, and that was it. And then we went back and we all wore masks and stayed away from each other. It was fantastic.
I mean, it was definitely it really helped us in post. It always feels strange to say that there's benefits to COVID, but I mean, it did end up giving us a lot of time, because I continued working almost through the entire, I didn't really stop working on the show. I'm still working on the show. And it really gave us a lot of time to look at all the episodes. All of the episodes were still being edited and re-edited during that, what is 10, 9, 8, during that 7-month period when production was shut down. It gave us a chance to look at all of those episodes that had completed filming, refining them, changing them, making them better. So, and it gave us a chance to look at the scripts of episodes 9 and 10, and we did rewrites for the episode 9 and 10 to make those better. We came back and did some reshoots, as well as the material that we hadn't filmed in the first place. So it really gave us a chance to really make season 2 fantastic and really make us all feel good about where the episodes are ending up. So.
And then how about for you as well, Steve and Caroline, because your jobs are so much determined by being physically present on set. And I imagine that even just tiny details like sourcing items and finding things and having team members run out to purchase things must have looked wildly different when you came back to shooting. So how did it force you to kind of reevaluate the way that you were working with your teams?
For my part, we were ready to shoot the last major set. That was the last 8 days of the production. When they shut us down, it affected me by having to literally de-rig that entire huge set. So all the lighting went, it all came apart, it was all set on the floor. So coming back took nearly 4 weeks of reconstruction from my part to make it work. And there were other additions to the script that had to be accommodated in entries and exits, and we had to build more to the set. So it didn't really affect me other than the cost of rebuilding the set. And Caroline?
For us, we were also ready to shoot. And then that, obviously it wasn't, the costumes were ordered, put aside and stored. But then with the rewrites, we had to create some new costumes. And as I was mentioning, I was actually on another movie at the time. So I was there virtually as a support person, but Kristen Bond, one of my assistants, took over, and she was doing the additional photography. So I can't speak to it that much. There were only a few costumes missing though. So those ones were shopped, and I know shopping is different than it used to be, and the stores aren't open as long, and there isn't as much merchandise available, so the choices are slightly smaller. You just have to think differently about how we do everything, in terms of shopping and finding things. But life in COVID now.
And finally, I wanted to ask each of you about, what's a particular accomplishment that you feel like you're proudest of having achieved and accomplished in the work that you do and you bring to Snowpiercer?
Geoff, why don't you go first?
I'm gonna go first. I was just gonna say I'll go first. To be honest, I'm really proud of the exterior, like the design, the aesthetics of Snowpiercer. It was.
Well, and Geoff designed this shot right here.
I did actually. I storyboarded that in. Yes, that is.
You had it on a napkin, and you were like, "Do you think this will work?" And I'm like, "Yes,
this will work. This will work." We were imbibing on a Friday night. So anyways, that's another story. No, but literally I helped direct and guide the aesthetic of the exterior look of the train, and it's sort of it's one of those things that you always wanted to be like, yes, I had a key hand in designing the that unique thing that will hopefully live forever.
Yeah, I mean, on season 2, I came on in a more enhanced role. I'm a co-producer on season 2, and I'm not only editing. So I edited 5 of the episodes of season 2, but also supervising the editing of all the episodes, doing edit tweaks on all the episodes, and also helping supervise the music and the sound and everything. So, you know, I'm so much more heavily involved in season 2 on a creative level on every episode. And it's so rewarding when you can do that, because you know, are having an impact on so many different aspects of the show, in terms of how it appears on the screen, in terms of the post elements. And it just, you know, I love that. I mean, on season 1, there are the episodes that I edited, and, you know, I had a lot of input in those, obviously. So, but having more impact and input into the entire world and the sound of the world and the feel of the world, in all those elements, I mean, it's just, it's fantastic. I mean, it's such a wonderful opportunity, and it's such a unique world. So that's fantastic.
I guess I would say that I'm just really proud of my team's contribution to the whole look of the show, and you know, our creative efforts and helping with the whole look and giving the actors the ability to feel their characters, and not any one particular character or situation or costume really, but the whole thing overall.
How about for you, Steve?
If I had to choose any one contribution to season 2, I'd have to say the results of my conversation with Graham and Aubrey about Wilfred's car. We ended up with a marvelous synthesis of wealth and just the sheer strange character of the man, the idiosyncrasies that we put into that environment, that were thought through each and every one thing in detail, that you look at and you get an aspect of that man, of who Wilfred is, from his intelligence to his craziness to his brutality. It's all there in the bits and pieces that you see that he has placed in that car. And I think that for my part, that was an extremely successful application of design and decoration.
It's beautiful.
Thank you.
Well, the work that you all do on the series is honestly just really, really stunning. It's one of the most, you know, visually comprehensive TV series that's out there at all. So congratulations on everything that you've all brought into these first 2 seasons. And I hope that we get to keep watching more episodes of Snowpiercer. And thank you so much for taking time to talk with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.